Hi folks, Kellen here. I am doing the review out of Chapter 3 of Programming Principles and Practice using C++. Okay, so the first question is, what is computation? I will say computation is work done to provide some result. That's what I think. Let's see, what do we mean by inputs and outputs to a computation? Give examples. An example of computation is the work performed by the square function. It takes as input a number and returns the square of that number as output. That's a pretty satisfactory answer, right? Whoop. Okay, let's keep going here. What are the three requirements a programmer should keep in mind when expressing computation? Might have to dive back into the book here, I don't remember. I think it's this. Let's see. Correctness, simplicity, efficiency. Alright, that's that. Let's see, so I answered 1, 2, 3. Number 4, what does an expression do? It usually performs some work and stores the result somewhere. That's what I'll say there. What is the difference between a statement and an expression as described in this chapter? I'm going to have to look back. An expression is a simple computation and a statement allows the programmer to control the program's flow. That's my answer. Alright, that's done. Okay, question number 6. What is an L value? List the operators that require an L value. Why do these operators and not others require an L value? An L value appears on the left side of an operator. It stores a value the operators that require an L value are equals, times equals, divide equals, plus equals, minus equals, etc. These operators require an L value because we mean to store some data from a computation. Okay. What is a constant expression? Question. What is a constant expression? A constant expression is an expression that can be computed at compile time. Okay, that's number 7. What is a literal? A literal is the simplest piece of data we work with. An example of a literal is 3.2. Question. What is a symbolic constant and why do we use them? I'm actually not sure on that one, so let's go back and look around. Symbolic constant. A symbolic constant is giving a value to a variable only once. That value cannot be changed during program execution. That's what I'm going to say there. Alright. What is a magic constant? Give examples. Magic constant is an important value whose importance has been obscured by bad naming conventions. Example: S equals the speed of sound. S equals, I need to look up what the speed of sound is. Speed of sound, miles per hour. 767.269. This is the speed of sound in miles per hour in a flight simulator. This is probably an important constant, which would be used in other computations. Okay, that's a magic constant. Question: what are some operators that we can use for integers and floating point values? Answer: let's see, plus, minus, times, divide, divide, okay. Question: what operators can be used on integers but not on floating point numbers? Well, I know modulus. Modulus cannot be used on doubles. Let's see. Maybe there's a table here that would come in handy. Yeah, that's the only one I can find. Question: what are some operators that can be used for strings? Plus is the concatenation operator for strings. It combines the two strings given together. Whoop, I messed up my tabbing here. When would a programmer prefer a switch statement to an if statement? When actions depend on a constant expression. When actions depend, I don't know, when it is clear that there are different cases for program flow. That's a shitty answer right there. What are some common problems with switch statements? What are some common problems with switch statements? I know one of them is they cannot be used with string values. Forgetting to use the break keyword in the cases, in the differing cases. That's what I'm going to say there. Alright, what's the next question? What is the function of each part of the header line in a for loop, and in what sequence are they executed? What is the function of each part of the header line in a for loop, and in what sequence are they executed? A for loop header line has three parts: initialization, loop control, and iteration. Initialization is performed first, then the loop control is checked. Lastly, the, what did I call it? The iterative step is performed. That's my answer there. Maybe not the best answer I've ever come up with, but whatever. Question: when should the for loop be used, and when should the while loop be used? Answer: prefer for loops over while loops, except when a while loop is more understandable. Question: describe what the line char foo int x means in a function definition. answer. This function takes as input an integer x and produces a character and returns a character when called. When should you define a separate function for part of a program? List reasons. Program should be broken into its simplest parts, and those parts can be written as functions. Not the best answer I've ever given. Alright. What can you do to an int that you cannot do to a string? What can you do to an int that you cannot do to a string? You can divide two integers, but you cannot divide a string. There we go. What can you do to a string that you cannot do to an int? There was this handy table of operators back here. That might help illuminate some light on what the answer is. What can you do to a string that you cannot do to an int? I'm not sure. I'll have to come back to this to answer. To provide. I have to come back to this in the future to provide a satisfactory answer. Yeah, I'm sort of stumped on that one because all the operators you can use on a string you can also use on an int, right? So like plus, minus, divide. Yeah, I don't know. What is the index of the third element of a vector? Answer 2. 0, 1, 2. That's 3 items. Wow, I'm a programmer. I can count from 0. Okay, question. How do you write a for loop that prints every element of a vector? Answer: for int x in v cout x. Okay. question. I just assumed it was a vector that held integers because it doesn't specify the type of thing that the vector is storing. So, as an example, you can loop through all the elements of a vector. Use this, use a for loop in the colon syntax. So, what does vector char alphabet 26 do? It creates a vector that is 26 elements long, and each element is a character. Describe what push back does to a vector. Push back adds an element to the end of a vector. Well, that's pretty simple, right? What does the vector's member size do? It returns the current size of the vector in question. What makes vector so popular / useful? Lists of things are very common in programs. How do you sort the elements of a vector? Answer: call the standard library function that sorts vectors. Okay, so that's the review done. Now we're on to terms. So your first term is abstraction. Hiding how something is done, but specifying the inputs and outputs. That's my definition of abstraction. I'm not quite sure. Function: a piece of code that accepts input and produces output. It has a return type, a name, a parameter list, a body, and optionally a return statement. Okay. R value. Right hand side of a statement. iteration specifies input, specifies the header of a function specifies the type of a named object. That's what I'll say there. Iteration, walking over a list of items one by one. Statement. Usually a line of code that performs some small computation. A computation may be performed in multiple statements. While statement, a looping construct that executes as long as its condition is true. Output, the result of a computation. Range 4 statement. A looping construct that loops over the elements of a data structure like a vector. Repetition, doing something over and over again. Conditional statement. What has to be true in order for a loop to execute its body. Input, data that comes into it. Data that a function operates on. It comes from outside the function. Sort, a standard library routine that sorts a collection, such as a vector. Else, the default branch of an if statement if none of the other conditions are true. Member function, a function that is called on an object with the dot operator. A bit of Java knowledge is helping me answer that question. Okay, push back a member function of a vector that adds an element to the end of the vectors list. Computation. Work performed to gain some result. Increment. Add 1 to a value and store it. Size. A member function of vector that gets how many elements are currently stored in it. Divide and conquer. Breaking a program up into smaller pieces that collaborate to produce a desired outcome. L value appears on the left hand side of an expression, stores a value in an object. Again, not the best answer I've ever come up with. Vector, a data structure provided by the standard library that is akin to a paper list. For statement, a looping construct with 3 parts in the header line. Initialization, condition, and iteratives and step. If statement, a branching construct that executes part of a program if true, and another part if the condition is false. Okay, selection, the act of only executing certain branches of code based on conditions. Definition, setting aside memory for storing values. A loop, a piece of code that executes repeatedly. Switch statement, a conditional construct that executes pieces code by comparing a variable to a set of constants. Expression: a small computation like 2 plus 2 times 8. Okay. So that's the chapter 3 terms done. Okay, on to exercises. Write a program that reads a string from input and then for each character read, prints out the character and its integer value on a line. I think I know how to do that. Let's try it out. Okay, so include IOStream, include string, main, using standard, using namespace standard. So cn, let's do string input, cn input for char c input c out c Let's see, ex2 exercise 2.c++ g++ exer2.c++ Oh, I saved it as exer1. Okay. This is a big long string. Character T. Alright. Forgot to add a new line here. I think that satisfies the requirements of the exercise. Okay, folks, that's enough programming stuff for me for the moment. So I'm going to take a break and maybe return later.